walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors, walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho. Following the serpentine path. Life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed, and I'm a plant walker, song keeper, word weaver, artesana, visual and performance artist, womb wisdom keeper, and your guide on this serpentine path of life. Together, we'll dive deep into all things related to plant medicine, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, rites of passage and initiation, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, and the ongoing, never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed. I am your host, and today it is a huge honor and privilege and gift to be able to welcome my guest to the show, Natalie Deryn Johnson. Thank you so much for being here with this conversation.
Your energy. I'm just already feeling what's about to happen in the room with us.
Yeah.
This is a major honor feels like the wrong word, but I'm so grateful that the listening has led us here.
Yeah, I feel the potency of the conversation has been moving since we decided that we were gonna get on the phone together and record this conversation. So thank you. So I'll begin with the question that I ask all of my guests, which is if your ancestors were here with us now, which of course they always are, how would they introduce you and what role would they say that you play in your family lineage?
Honestly, my ancestors would introduce me as a troublemaker, and I think that's their language for calling me a nature spirit, a mischievous fairy who is connected to the enchanted nature of reality. And my chosen ancestor, which is so beautiful to recently have a connection with a chosen ancestor who is very so healing to have this connection and has a lot of adoration for doesn't really belittle these qualities in me the same way that it's called troublemaker over here, and he calls it exquisite mystic poet, so there's so many ancestors that we get to connect to and how they relate to the disruption and the creation of beauty.
Yeah, feels accurate just from my experiencing of you over the years. And to give people context about how Natalie and I know each other. So we met when I was still living in New York City, many years ago at this point. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. It's been a while. And it was at some friend's apartment. And I remember one of our friends, Nico, who I grew up with from Colorado, when I showed up, you came out of the bedroom like you hadn't been around in the living room, and you like arose from the bedroom. And Nico was like, "Wait, have you guys met?" And I was like, "No, I don't know who that is." And he was like, "Oh God, you guys have to meet." And I was like, "Hey, I'm Claire." And you're like, "Hi, I'm Natalie." And we got into a conversation, and I was like, "This girl is on my level of fairy magic." Like I walk with a lot of fairy medicine as well. And meeting you, I was like, I don't know what wavelength frequency she's on, but like I'm in it with her. Like, let's go. And so over the years, we've had many periods of dipping in and out of each other's lives and being able to receive one another's medicine in different ways. And it's always felt just so symbiotic and cohesive. And we've been wanting to work on projects for a long time, and we've like started things, and then it like has kind of dropped off because other things have taken priority. And it's always been in the ethers, though, of like there's something to be co-created and co-woven together. And essentially, how we got to this point of being able to come onto the podcast together is that right now I am launching and promoting my upcoming group class, the Natural Birth Control Series, where I'm going to be going through how to transition off of hormonal IUDs and contraceptives, how to learn how to track your fertility and observe your biointuitive natural signals that say, like, hey, I could have a baby right now. Hey, I can't have a baby right now. And then learning how to work with herbal allies for pregnancy prevention and conscious contraception. So I'm all on Instagram and all over Substack, like promoting this upcoming class. And Natalie DM'd me, and she was like, "Did I ever tell you about the story of how I had two IUDs implanted at the same time?" And I was like, "What?" And you were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Whoa, holy shit." And you were like, "I've wanted to share this story for a long time, and I haven't ever found the avenue." And I immediately was like, "Well, if you would feel comfortable coming onto the podcast and sharing, it would be an honor to hold space for that story." And you were down. And as soon as you opened that door, I realized that this whole project of this class that I'm teaching is so much bigger than just this class. It's really this big call from the collective womb consciousness of bringing forth the stories around women's experiences with hormonal birth control, with IUDs, with a lot of the boundary violations that occur, with just the reality of miseducation that we receive as women. There's so much to it that I won't get into. And so you opened that door, and I sent out a call to my email list. I was like, "Hey, if there are any women who want to come onto the podcast and share their birth control story, it would be an honor to host you and to hold space for that story medicine." And literally within 24 hours, I had like 5 women who had already booked interviews. And I was just like, "Natalie, thank you. Like, thank you so much for co-weaving this with me and really opening this space for so much more to come forth." And so that's just like a little bit of the spiritual soup that we're swimming in right now, coming into this conversation. And it feels really, really exciting and really big. But, before we get into that whole story, I would love to give you just an opportunity to share a little bit about your path, about your work, about your orientation, whatever you want to offer to the listeners.
Yeah, totally. Also, I'm going to first start with a small clarification, which is I went to remove the IUD and they didn't take it out, and then they placed a second one. Either way, 2 IUDs is too many, in my opinion. Yeah, a little about Natalie Land, Natalie orientation. First thing I'll say is I'm a deeply presence oriented person. So I'm even more now in connection to how languaging is an entire ordeal. As much as I love language, it's almost something that has to be summoned because my spirit mostly wants to sit in the beauty of existence. And I think it's beautiful to hold conversation and to bring language to name things, to unname things, to have that dialogue and expression in the world is so powerful. And it's been such a journey noticing my naturalness has this nonverbal quality that I've grown to really appreciate. And even it's just a beautiful strangeness to be in this phase of my life where language has been so intentional and I've cultivated it, I've crafted with it. And to almost like lose the architecture of how your mind works and then resurface is very humbling. But my path has been, how do I describe this? Like anytime I like talk to people about me, it's always feels important to describe that I was born with dislocated hips and put in a pelvic harness for the first 4 months of my life. I was supposed to have a hip replacement when I was 15, but I shifted the way I inhabit my body. And so I've never had a hip replacement. I went to school for dance and choreography. I'm someone who won science fair and then has been revealed to be mystical. And that has been such a wild a part of my adult life is like having one hand on you were supposed to think about the world in this way, and now I'm inside of gnosis. Now I'm relating in allowing my poetic nature to take the lead, to be quite spontaneous and to really own that whimsicality is an intelligence. I've lived a lot of my life being pretty demeaned for being whimsical and bright and connected to being on Earth. And being on Earth is actually very magical. Being here in reality is actually very enchanted. And I think we've been very tricked as to like what being grounded is. And I have just found that it's just a lot more stunning. It's just a lot more stunning. And I can be tricked sometimes into feeling very objectified. And so I keep my hand on my biggest path is defying objectification. If I'm going to get simple, I would say I am on the path of defying the culture of objectification.
Yeah, beautiful. And yeah, you are someone who is such a word weaver. Like when you really get into like the channeling, like when your intuition is coming through,
Yeah.
things that I have heard you say, I'm like, how the fuck did she come up with that? And the way that you are able to yeah, spell cast in a very ethical and really clean and really pure way is definitely a level that I haven't seen from many people. And then also, yeah, that strange reality of the fact that there's so much that can be named and so much that can be unnamed, but also like God works on a level that is so beyond the limitations of human language. And I think something that I've loved, especially in working with you, in one session that we did that was like a lot of somatic experiencing and just body work. As someone who up until that point had done a lot of like talk therapy for my entire life, you know, and I had gone through all the stories of my trauma and all this and blah blah blah. I had intellectualized all of it, you know, for a decade probably. And that was helpful to a point. And then I remember you were the first person who I did a somatic experiencing session with, where you were able to mirror and reflect back to me just like the pinpoint moments, emotions, experiences, feelings that you were seeing in my body. And I was like, whoa, yeah, like it's really held in the body. And it makes sense. And it's also crazy because I was a dancer as well. I'm still a dancer. I'm just not a professional dancer. I dance my ass off every day, you know? That's like my daily devotion is like my little shaking my ass in my bedroom. But as a dancer, it's so crazy to me that I was still so cut off from my body and what my body was holding, even though I spent every day training and staring at my body in the mirror and being obsessed with like how perfect the line could be and how clean and how proper. And then and also how I could get paid to be perfect, you know, like to have the perfect body and to be in a space with someone who's also a dancer, who's also so deeply interwoven with the medicine of the body,
to be pointing out to me, like, yeah, there's pain there. Yeah, there's rage there. Yeah, let it go. Yeah, how does that feel in your body? I was like, oh my God, I've never asked myself. I think I was like 24 when we did um that particular session, and just being like, wow, I've never asked myself, how do I feel my body? As someone who went through so much illness throughout my life, being in and out of hospitals as a child, like really dealing with a lot of chronic health issues, predominantly with my reproductive system, and being like, wow, I've never asked my body how it feels. I know that there's pain there, like obviously, but I've never dropped into it. And so I love being able to offer that orientation to this conversation. Like, yes, we're going to be speaking to the reality of the experience of what you went through, but what is really coming forth is the story of your body and what was held there. Yeah, a beautiful way to orient people. So yeah, okay. Let's get into the meat of it. I guess I could ask you first, how did you first get on hormonal birth control? I don't know if you were ever on the pill, or like what your decision was to initially get the hormonal IUD. Like, where were you at that point in your life, and what do you think led you to making the decision to get an IUD inserted?
Yeah. I'm having flashbacks of seeing you dance at the kitchen. And while like all the dancing bodies are around us, I also want to answer this question. So I went to school or to college, and I had hit puberty 2 months before turning 18 in high school. And so I hadn't really had enough experience yet to regulate my period. But I'm in college, and birth control, contraception feels pretty wise at that point. I'm entering into sexual expression. And something I was realizing earlier today while kind of reviewing the path of these incidences and all of this was how, in going to the doctor and reviewing the options that we as when people have, females have to manage potential pregnancy. I think I was offered a few different things, and the IUD was really attractive to me because it seemed like the symptoms were easier for me emotionally. There was something about, like, it kind of conveyed a kind of reliability. I didn't think I would be reliable enough to take the pill on time. I have a kind of relationship with time where reliability happens over time, but not on a schedule, a certain kind of regularity. So the IUD was really helpful in that sense. I started with a hormonal IUD. I remember getting it inserted and the cramping and lying on the bed and my sister being there. It was kind of a huge sisterhood moment, actually. It was so incredibly painful to have done. And what I realized earlier today is that the IUD strangely afforded me protection in the sense that I was not surrounded with the emotional resources to manage my relationship with living in a female body. And it postponed me reckoning with my body dysmorphia and my relationship to gender and violence. And my choreography was holding place for domestic violence, gender and female violence, ancestral healing, which I then understood years later what I was doing as a witch in choreography. It's a fun way to talk about it. But the IUD kind of postponed my relationship with my cycle because I didn't have a period for a very long time. And it created a non-cyclical state that I had an easier time identifying with, given my masculine intellectual capacity, my drive, all of this. So I felt very distanced from the reality of honoring my womb.
I can't count the number of women who have told me that they want to transition off of birth control, but they don't know where to start. They're scared, they're vulnerable, and they don't know where to get accurate evidence-based information. I feel these women's pain because I too was once in their shoes. I transitioned off of hormonal birth control at age 20 after being on the pill for 4.5 years. I didn't do any preparation, I didn't do any research, I just quit the pills cold turkey and got a copper IUD inserted a few months later. What happened over the next 6 years of my life was a complete and total shit show. I struggled with acne that was so bad that I ended up on spironolactone, doxycycline, Accutane, and every single topical that you could think of. My weight went through super intense fluctuations that made zero sense. My cramps were so painful that I couldn't get out of bed for the first few days of my cycle. I was bleeding through my clothes. My emotions were all over the place. I had constant headaches, a totally erratic sleep schedule, chronic vaginal infections, and lots of embarrassing bloating. Worst of all, I was entirely disconnected from the seat of my creative power, my womb. Now, the thing is, all of this pain, confusion, and disembodiment could have been easily avoided had I known then what I know now about female hormonal health and sacred womb reverence. Now, after years of healing my own relationship with my cycle, my fertility, and my sovereign right to prevent pregnancy without the use of hormonal contraceptives and IUDs, I have a lot of hard-earned wisdom to share with you all. The truth is that I didn't have a doctor to educate me on the medical side of this massive transition, and I didn't have a wise woman to midwife me through the spiritual side of this massive transition. But I figured out how to reclaim this biological and spiritual education for myself, and now I can offer it to other sisters who are seeking guidance and support. This journey of deep self-healing and womb liberation is what inspired my upcoming online group class, the Natural Birth Control Series. Together, we will dive into the physiologic brilliance of female fertility by interweaving the clinical facts and the mystical wisdom that all of our great-great-great-grandmothers once walked with. We will be reclaiming our womb sovereignty together in ceremony, in community, in the way that women have been doing since the beginning of time. Classes will be held on Zoom from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the first 3 Sundays of October, with class recordings available for anyone who is unable to attend live. Our first class on October 5th will be focused on how to transition off of hormonal birth control and IUDs. Our second class on October 12th will be focused on intuiting our body's biological fertility signals. And our third class on October 19th will be focused on plants for pregnancy prevention and conscious contraception. The Natural Birth Control Series is open to women of all ages and life phases, including women in their fertile childbearing years, along with mothers, grandmothers, and aunties who want to help educate and support the young women in their lives. The Natural Birth Control Series is being offered for $33, which gives you access to all 3 classes and recordings, along with my extensive resource guide to support you on your womb sovereignty journey. To learn more about the program, you can visit the link in the show notes. Looking forward to seeing you in class.
Yeah, I love what you just spoke to there around, well, 2 things. One, this is such a common story, right? When women are coming into our sexuality. Oftentimes in our late teens, early 20s, we get into maybe our first serious relationship and we are wanting to be responsible. We're like, okay, if I'm going to be having sex and I know that I'm not ready to call a child in, I'm going to do the responsible thing. I'm going to go on birth control. That has been offered to us as like, this is what a responsible grown adult woman would do. And it's almost like a false initiation, right? It's like saying like, this is what you do. When you do this, you are mature, right? And so I can have a lot of empathy for my younger self. I can, of course, have a lot of empathy for all of the women who have gone through that same experience of like initially getting onto it because they're told by the medical industrial complex, they're told by the pharmaceutical companies, they're often told by their own mothers or older women in their lives, like, this is what you do to be responsible. And then there's like pride behind it of like, I'm doing the right thing. I can really hold space for that. And I can have just so much compassion for my younger self who really was like, I'm doing the right thing. And what I would say actually was that at that moment in time, that was the right thing because I was not resourced with the resources that I have now of knowing how to track my cycle and knowing how to prevent pregnancy with plants. I didn't know how to do that at the time. That was really the best choice for me in that moment. And then I also love what you spoke to around like the protection medicine. You know, I've spoken very openly on the podcast in my writing about the high degree of sexual abuse that I have experienced in my life, like 2 full decades of a lot of sexual violence. And I had so many blocks with my biological reality of being in a female body and everything that that comes with, both the beauty, the medicine, the joy, the juiciness, the vitality, the fertility, all of that good stuff. And then also the horrendous reality of what it means to be a woman in this world a lot of the time, you know, especially as someone who experienced so much sexual violence, like the profound fear unconsciously at first, and then, you know, re-victimization and all of the process that I went through around the fear of being raped again, right? And so you naming that protection medicine around it also gives me another deep layer of compassion for myself, which was that at that time, and like I first got on birth control for hormonal acne when I was 16, but then I went back on it again when I got into a serious relationship, and not being able to reckon with the fact that I had some severe sexual trauma that I had no resourcing to touch. I had no one in my life who was picking up on the signs, which is shocking to me. I was with multiple therapists. None of them was ever able to point out that, like, wow, these are definitely signs of someone who had been sexually abused as a child. Like, that blows my mind, actually. But I love that naming of just like, yes, I was not ready to face that. And the birth control pill actually really did protect me in that way. Because I couldn't I think that if I had been less numb during that period of my life when I didn't have the support systems, I would have gone even more fucking crazy than I did. I went very crazy for a while, but I would have gone even more crazy, probably to a degree where I might have been like fully institutionalized. And so I love that you brought that forth. But kind of back to your story, I would love to hear now about, you know, what did you experience while you were on that hormonal IUD, and then what the decision was then to switch to the copper one, the non-hormonal one.
Mm. I'm sitting with the like how many years in therapy until you actually start holding rape trauma. That's so relatable. It's amazing how long it can take for that to be a centerpiece. Um, that aside, yeah, so I was on the hormonal IUD, college. Then I moved to New York City, and I'm having this like it's like so much unbecoming is happening. I think this is like after knee surgery, I'm diagnosed with gastroparesis. It's just like a litany of chronic illness, junk, fatigue, what have you. And I'm like going through the medical complex, like is the word melange? I don't know. It was just like, okay, I'm like in there, meticulous, looking. And you have these skills too. We're like warriors. We're like, we're looking, we're going to look so hard. We're going to be responsible. So I'm in there with the skill set that I have, advocating as I can. And it was like, okay, let's remove a variable. One of the variables is a hormonal IUD. Well, if we switch to non-hormonal, and I still wasn't really ready to do the pill. I wasn't really around enough voices yet to try more herbal approaches. And so it was like, this is the thing I can imagine doing. So I went in, and I'm in the middle of a breakup. And in this time, I really didn't have a lot of shame about my emotional. I used to refer to range of self as something that I kind of worked with. A lot of my languages is very non-pathological, because when you're an artist, you're just kind of like managing and interacting with your emotionality in a poetic sense. You're not ready to feel like your existence is inherently only due to trauma or wrong. There's something beautiful simultaneously. And so I went in to do this, and I remember just being like in this breakup. It's so poetic, so poetically devastated. I think I've been pretty passionate about things that I sometimes forget I'm passionate about. I can be very passionate about feeling unwell, and I was just in it. And so I went and got it. I went to go to get it switched. My memory of this moment too, in the storytelling sense, is that like I'm in the middle of this breakup, and I'm like so wet over like the unrequited love. I'm in this like erotic, very high sensory moment. The breakup is very high sensory for me. And then I go in there, and they're supposed to switch them. And all I remember is the insertion and feeling like a neutered cat. And then I went alone. I went to this like grocery store, picked up chocolate, went to my apartment up on 142nd Street or whatever, and was like curled up on the floor. I think the past lover came by to pick up some things. We're in the middle of moving out from living together. And I'm just like curled up on the floor. And I just remember thinking, neutered cat. And then later I had healthcare professionals actually victim shame me. Like, why didn't I know? I know, totally. It's been really interesting, my relationship to talking to other, I think there are beautiful physicians in the world. And I've also interacted with some physicians who have victim blamed me as if I am the one responsible for being on the receiving end of medical malpractice.
Wow. Something that I think is really interesting is that you were dealing with a lot of health symptoms at this moment in time, and you're navigating the medical system and you're trying to figure it out and you're advocating for yourself and you're doing everything that a single human being can do while moving through the horror show that is the medical industrial complex. And what I find interesting is that the doctors said, oh, the hormonal IUD might be a factor in this, right? Like they know that it's not good for women's bodies to be altering our natural, normal, biologically designed, biologically coherent hormonal matrix. They know that that has a drastic impact on our health because our menstrual cycle is our fifth vital sign. And so the fact that they were like, that they're offering this to women and that they offered it to you and then being like, yeah, that could definitely be making you sick. I'm like, well, then, so you know, that's insane, right? And just, yeah, you saying like feeling like a little neutered cat. That is so sad, that little imagery. And also, it's also not a surprise that the choice to get off of the hormonal IUD, everything with your health going on, and then the breakup occurring at the same time, like it feels like kind of universal alarm bells of being like, get back into alignment, get back into connection with the womb. It's a story that I hear often from women that like getting their hormonal IUD or going off of hormonal birth control also coincides with the ending of a relationship, the ending of a career path, the ending of like a life chapter. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so yeah, I guess what is the next chapter of that story after you got the copper IUD put in?
Totally. And oh, yeah, I smile. It's like I almost have to move to be able to like move through telling the story. It's like, whoa, because it is a lot. It's a lot of energy. It's a long amount of time. And also, I don't know if a doctor did help me make that choice. I think I had to do a lot of self-leading. And I do think you're right. Doctors do know that they're interrupting something. I think you're connected to something really real. And I think what's wild in my story that probably relates to a lot of the people that you're interacting with is feeling in the dark because this wisdom has been made difficult to find, even though it's our birthright to have this relationship to the land and to one another and to have more sovereignty about how we interact with birthing in general. And to feel like having a flashlight and being like, am I in charge? I'm gonna have to self-lead this. This is my flashlight. And being like, I'll come up with ideas. But I think that is the rebirth of the intuition outside of these transformational moments that you're bringing up. A transition is occurring, and the self is like, all right, gotta knock some things over. I'm gonna emerge through this. This is the only next thing I know. And you just one step at a time, you start emerging. Kind of almost like hardly in collaboration. Hardly in collaboration and ideally in collaboration. So hopefully that doesn't feel like a tangent. But so it gets switched when the first one is supposed to expire the same month. I end up hospitalized for what they're calling PID, a pelvic inflammatory disease, which I think is a pretty misnaming because it definitely did not stay in my pelvis. And so I call my mom. You know those moments where you call the person, you call your mom, and you're like, wow, okay, it's a mom phone call. it's the elder phone call. It's like someone, you're making that phone call you typically don't call, and you're like, wow, I've breached my pain tolerance. I've breached what I can do by myself. And I'm like, I'm on the floor in my apartment. I'm supposed to move in with my recent partner of the, and I'm calling my mom. It's like supposed to be one of the last days in my apartment before moving in. So another transition moment, to your point. And she's like, this is not a stomach ache. You need to get to people. So I stumbled across to the bar across from my apartment on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn. These two strangers circle around me. What I love about my story is actually I feel very privileged by the amount of care and people coming to my side, because my story could go a lot more poor than it did. It could go really poorly. But I stumbled across the street to the bar. These two strangers circle around me. The bartender is like, you're not allowed in here. I'm in pain. And he's trying to get me out of the bar. These two strangers call me an ambulance. The ambulance takes me to the nearest hospital. This hospital is understaffed for the amount of patients that are coming in. It's pretty scary in a pretty under-resourced neighborhood. And I come in, the wait is really long. I want to leave. The doors are locked. They don't make it easy to leave. And I'm not well. So like I'm having a difficult time advocating for myself, and the door is locked. I don't know. And so at one point I end up like on a gurney. They give me Benadryl. And I remember telling my mom earlier, you don't have to come, but this moment of finally having Benadryl releases enough of my self-armoring that I say, you are allowed to come. Like, please come. So my mom just drives straight to the airport. She told me this morning she didn't pack a bag. She just went straight to the airport, got on the first flight. She arrived like in the middle of the night. It's one of these mom miracle moments. And when she arrives, I'm in the ER. There's a lot of neglect going on. It's actually very wild to reimagine the scenario. They give me morphine. They're not paying attention to me having an allergic reaction. My mom has to go and like chase down a nurse. I like shit in my bed. They won't change the bedding. They're like, we either change your bedding or we give you your medicine, but we can't do both. It was very strange. Eventually, I know some of the details are actually pretty really nasty. It was a very traumatizing experience for me and my loved ones. Some friends actually ended up coming when I reflected on my story earlier this morning. I was actually so amazed that because of the intimacy and care that I've been leading with in my life through my art and as someone investigating interdependence, in that moment, it really showed up. So I wasn't alone in the ER. My mom was there. I had some friends show up, and that really made a big difference. Because I was having this allergic reaction. Like there are ways in which I wasn't going to be able to advocate. And it was deeper than Alice in Wonderland. This was just like lots going on. Eventually I get an ultrasound. They discover I have 2 IUDs. That was like a funhouse moment. It was like, whoa, that is highly unexpected, but they're taking a long time to figure out, why are you so sick? What is going on? I end up spending the night there. They put the IV in, and I think the technical term is infiltrated. But anyway, the IV water spills in. The nurses don't come to help me. There's like an immense amount of like neglect on neglect. It's like a worst case scenario of being in a hospital emergency setting. There's so many details. I want to slow down so that I can sit with like what's most important about this story, because I could constantly flesh out like what's going on. We could constantly reflect on what's there. What's coming now is my mom. It was nice to do this phone call. I'm so grateful to be here with you. It's set in motion more things. Of course, like healing from this incident has echoed, as you say, into our lineages, into our communities, and even preparing to be here today, like the echo, like we get to continue that healing. And I was on the phone with her this morning, and she said, as someone who's represented doctors before, she was floored that the gynecologist didn't try to protect themselves. They like just sent over the records. They sent a car. They switched me to another hospital. That the physician who had made this error, who's actually a very beautiful person, immediately adjusted and was like, okay, she needs to be in a different hospital. These are the steps that need to happen. I'm going to send my residents. I sign what is this thing called? It's like an AMA. It's like against medical advice. We leave this hospital. And now we're in like chapter 2. We're in the new hospital and the residents are there. And I think it's 10 minutes before I end up in the back with her, I think residents or students or whatever, like young doctors. And they remove the 2 IUDs. And I think I had just done a solo show on quantum physics and romance. So I'm like spouting off like quantum physics and I'm so nervous. I'm actually very nervous about the removal because inserting IUDs is actually very painful experience. For a cervix that hasn't given birth before, the first time it's contracting is around an IUD, and that's really unnatural. And so like you're in your maidenhood kind of having a false like moment, and it's very confusing for the body. I bet there's a lot of ways to talk about it. Anyway, so I'm very scared. I'm very scared of having it removed. So I'm just like storytelling and being funny and the things that we do in traumatic moments. And they seamlessly remove it. And I remember feeling so lucky that the second IUD had been floating in there and didn't perforate anything. It's incredibly lucky because 3 years with 2 IUDs is so unnatural, so dangerous. And the benefit was that I had this like stability, a false stability, a non-cyclical emotional life. It came with other things. I still had mental health challenges and things that were probably in relationship to this, but there was this like kind of stability. And then with the removal of the IUDs, I had to heal from all this medical malpractice and trauma. But I had suicidal periods for the first time for many months. You know, the body's trying to stabilize again. And I feel like this has been your wheelhouse as a medicine keeper to talk about all those things. And in my experience, I was like, wow, like the hormonal journey after the removal was very big, especially since I had already thought I was removing hormones because that was something I was trying to do. So I had hormones I had 2, whatever. Anyway, so there's that element, the suicidal periods. And then it was becoming a cyclical being. And that part of me that had internalized misogyny coming forward of fearing being a woman, being a female body, being feminine, being emotional like my female peers, because my emotional objectivity had been pretty protected. And even though I cared about emotional expression in art, I felt the protection and a lot of I felt a safe distance from my body as someone who used to feel like suicidal ideation around having breasts and all of this complexity around my body. And some of my peers who've experienced discomfort in their body have gone on different journeys of what's it like to identify with your body, to feel seen, to experience it being safe to inhabit into our vessels. And my journey has been one, even before the removal, of wanting to be at peace with where I live. So that was the way I did it. I was like, my body's really intelligent. I want to partner with my body. I want to learn about the magic of my specific body, the intelligence of my body. I don't want to disown my breasts and I don't want to disown my womb. And that felt like an uphill battle. But the small moves I had been making towards that, they're not really small, but when you put a cataclysmic event like that into your, like something like that just completely changes the pacing at which you relate to your body. You don't have a choice in the matter. There was violation, of course, already, so there's non-choice occurring somewhere in the story. But then that moment was this lightning bolt that was like, your female body, your womb is now taking centerpiece. And what does it mean when your intuition and discernment include your womb deserving protection, which is an orientation I never had before, that I deserve protection, that it was even possible. I think I had advocated for myself in ways and had like audacity, but I wasn't thinking about protection, the way that I began to orient towards whether or not my environment cared about the fact that I have the potential to create future children, and that I'm a steward of future life, and like to keep me safe is to keep future generations not only safe, but to be a conduit of new life, and to be in situations where that feels unimportant to your surroundings. It was just so new. I could see how I was different than the other femmes and women who were surrounding themselves with people who wanted to participate in their emotional well-being. And watching me shift from that not even being interesting, if anything, like almost like playing with a punk part of my sexuality, like it's discardable and play and I can go hard. And as a dancer, we want to see what we can do. There's like this proving element. I don't always want to say it that way, but I think there was a part of, as a dancer, you want to prove that you can take on certain material. And then learning that that was just me sacrificing myself and wasn't devotional and actually was self-harming was just the next element of humility, to go, you thought you could do these things, not because a creator or religion, says you shouldn't, and you're ignoring some religious rule, but, I thought that I could partake in life in this way. And I'm learning from my body. I'm learning from inside myself what integrity is. And that level of integrity is something that will undo my self-image. And what does it mean to orient around an internal bodily integrity when it makes me have to speak for myself, express myself, know myself energetically, take care of myself in ways that I had never knew existed, was underprepared to do before, was too humiliated to be seen as holding that power, too scared to hold those boundaries. Like if we summarize the entire journey, it's the IUD journey, and it's stepping out of that contraception journey was the elevation of me beginning and refining my understanding of boundary and respect. And I did not have, or nor did I have to, respect myself the way that I became someone who had to learn what self-respect was. It was demanded of me to be a dignified person, not a superior person, but a dignified person, not a silly person, an intelligent person. Intelligent, as in like intelligence involves so many things, but I could no longer demean my intelligence. And I had to honor that I do see things, and I had to really pull apart the belittlement that my life had been wrapped in, as well as so many women, girls, the things that are important to us, our society, dominant society, however we want to talk about it. There's always like better language. I think does a really good job to make young girls and women feel like their emotional connection to life and the weight they hold and the playfulness that they have to actually transform those energies is silly and stupid. Instead of being like, these young women are holding so much on behalf of the lineage and the culture, their little bodies are constantly transmuting energy, and you're making fun of it and making them feel silly for being incredibly wonderful and appropriately enchanted.
Yeah. Wow. There's so many things that I could say in response to what you shared. I think just that last part that you were speaking to, I guess I'll start there and then kind of go back. So much of coming into how I want to speak about this class that I'm teaching, there can be so much fear and residual pain and trauma and violence from our own lived experiences, from our bloodlines, from the collective womb trauma that is undergone all day, every fucking day. And I was tapping into so much this past month as I was like, how do I want to speak about this class? How do I want to promote this class? How do I want to, homeopathically drop the essence of this class. And so much of it for me is actually coming back into that play that, as you just said, was like ripped out of me in my girlhood for 1,001 reasons, many of which was because of protection measures, just given my history. And this whole past month, I've just been like, God, I just want to dance again. Like, I just want to feel my body feeling good. And like, how many times have I had fear around showing my body moving in a sensual way that like expresses my vibrancy, my juiciness, my fertility, my vitality to the world, and feeling unprotected with that and just being like, no, fuck that, come back to the play of all of it. But, to kind of go back, I also had pelvic inflammatory disease when I was, God, 25. It was like a whole 9 month long journey that I think I've spoken about on previous episodes of the podcast. And what I can feel in myself, the unraveling of that. So much of that was around a lot of sexual abuse, but so much of that was also from unresolved womb imprinting of my cervical or my copper IUD that I got inserted. And even for like years after, just the mention of the word cervix would send me into a panic. Like, actually, it was like, oh my, like, I can't even hear that word because of the embodied trauma of what you just said, of getting it inserted. That's the first moment in my life that I ever felt a contraction. And I remember feeling that and being like, oh my God, if this is what a birth contraction is, I'm never fucking giving birth. Ever. Are you kidding me? And the doctor said the same thing. Oh, it'll feel like light cramping. Are you kidding? I almost passed out. Like, I truly almost, and I know women who have passed out when getting an IUD inserted. And it's, yeah, forcing that experience of a motherhood portal, what a contraction is, in your maiden years when you're not pregnant. You're actually saying to your body, no babies. And so it's really this very strange rewiring of the neural pathways, which is usually when you feel that contraction, it's baby is coming forth, life is going out. We are continuing thriving life on earth versus when you insert it on like a spiritual level, but also on a very clear biological cellular level, you're saying contraction equals bad, equals no babies, equals no life moving forward. And I felt the same fear when I was going to get my IUD out. Because my story of getting my IUD out was that right before I first started my path with ayahuasca in the Colombian jungle, for the first 3 months leading up to the ceremony, I was having back to back urinary tract infection, yeast infection, urinary tract infection, yeast infection, which had been my story for like 9 years. And when I was in ceremony in the Maloka, I remember having my hands on my womb and just crying, 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 and begging, like, what do I do? And this voice of a female elder came to me and was like, get that IUD taken out of you now. Like, the second you get back to the States, get that shit out. And I wasn't even back to the States for a whole week before I got it taken out. And I remember being at the gynecologist's office and crying, being like, I'm really scared to get this taken out. Like, it was so painful. And my gynecologist was like, why are you so scared? And she like couldn't understand why I was crying and had no emotional capacity to hold the depth of my womb story, the depth of what had happened to me. And luckily she took it out and it didn't hurt at all. And I remember walking out of there and being like, whoa, the world is different. And something else I was thinking about a lot in terms of your whole experience that you had in the hospital with the IUD, the amount of women that have that same hospital experience in a birth setting who are like violently degraded by the hospital, who are belittled, who are completely stripped of their personhood, who this ceremony of birth that is occurring in this moment, this sacred birth of a family constellation, calling a soul forth, happens under the umbrella, this like looming cloud of boundary violation after boundary violation after boundary violation, right? And so when I was hearing your story, I was like, if someone didn't have the context for what was being spoken about right now, they could assume that this was a birth story, right? Which in a way, it was a rebirth story. It was a rebirth of you as a woman. And it brought you, like you said, that lightning bolt back into this is what the female body is, and like find peace, find home with it. And I can also just relate so deeply to all of the gender soup that gets thrown into the mix. You know, I had a long gender journey for like 7 years of really, really wanting to divorce myself from womanhood and really feeling so terrified of like stepping into the world being seen as a woman because of the history of so much rape in my body, in my lineage. And I can definitely attribute a lot of that to my time on hormonal birth control, which was like 4.5 years, and then having the copper IUD for 3.5 years, being totally misaligned with my menstrual cycle, and having what at the time I thought was gender dysphoria, because that was the only explanation that I was being offered by the like big liberal bubble that I was living in. Like it was just like, yeah, that's gender dysphoria, and you're not a woman, you're actually non-binary, you're actually trans, you're actually just not that. And what I know just from my personal experience was that what that was not gender dysphoria. It was a profound fear of being violated again. It was a profound fear of experiencing more sexual abuse and violation in response to my feminine juiciness, my vitality, my capacity to birth life into the world, not just the life of children, but like the life of all of my creative projects, everything, like having that violated so many times starting at the age of 6. Like that was my story of why gender was so painful for me. And the deeper that I come back into the medicine of my womb, like I swear to God, every day I just wake up and I'm like, thank you, God, for making me a woman. Every time that I get my first day of my bleed, I'm on my first day of my bleed right now. My blood came this morning, it was dripping into the toilet. And I was like, thank you, God, for making me a woman. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I was never capable of doing that when I was in my early and mid 20s. Like, I saw my womanhood as this prison, like straight up prison, you know? And there's many factors to that, but it echoes a lot of your story of just like the amount of disconnection from my womb space was a disconnection from my womanhood, my capacity to envision motherhood, my connection with my own motherline wisdom and teachings that are encoded into my cells, even if they weren't passed down to me, you know, orally through my mothers, through my grandmothers, because they didn't receive it. Like, it will never leave me. The medicine of womanhood will never leave me. That's what I came on this earth to do. That's what I chose. And so there's just, yeah, there's so much there. I want to touch on something that you brought up, which was the relational aspect of how this impacted your partnership. Of course, it's like your relationship to sexuality, your relationship to womanhood is transforming drastically. And you're in a relationship with this man, you're moving in with him, right? And then you have this whole profound experience of medical malpractice and like hospital trauma and just insane violation in your womb space. And so, whatever you want to share about that experience that you've had with your partner, I would really love to hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the resonance and the echoing of our stories and the other women and womb beloveds, we're gonna listen to this. Like our stories are not that they're unique, and also so many of our ancestors have experienced rape. We've experienced violation and rape in this lifetime as well. And how that impacts how safe we feel to trust our bodies or reveal our bodies or enjoy our bodies, all of that. I just want to bow to all of you also sharing and meeting. We're meeting each other here and meeting everyone else here. It's just so awe-inspiring and as deep as we know it is. And I feel really proud to be in dialogue with you about it. Yeah, no, it's so good, and it could go, yeah, it's so good. And yeah, to the point about this transformation and how it relates to partnership, the first thing that comes up is when I was digesting my IUD story, I remember I used to think about the IUD as almost like hustle culture sex. It was like I could have sex um at a pacing beyond my like signature sensuality. I could have sex quicker, as in the pacing of it, the fucking of it, being having come inside of me, which is such a beautiful experience. But so all the beauty about sex, but the containment of the sex didn't have the same wisdom and discernment protection, and didn't require my past partners to energetically contribute to the preparation for sex, because I was available and fuckable, and I also was like more in my dance career, young dance self at the time, and so there was a readiness I was contributing, but it didn't require as much energetic sophistication. And when the IUDs were removed, what was fascinating to learn about is that our pheromone attraction, which I think a lot of people know about this, is that our attraction doesn't work the same. And when I first started dating my partner, I remember being like, his armpits don't smell good to me, but it feels like I should go. Like, there's always been this galactic like purpose between us. I was like, okay, fine. And then when the IUDs removed, he smelled so good, and it felt so affirming that I had chosen I had chosen to be with someone that I'm actually attracted to, and that my body is responding to. So there was strangely intuition protecting us. But I remember with the IUDs feeling like something was off. So that was like really relieving to feel like my body on its own terms was genuinely being pulled towards someone. So that was really comforting. The way it fell into our sex life at first with that much trauma was pretty difficult. It feels wild to see, I'm sure. And I'm sure he can speak for himself at some time, because it really does fall into everyone. I think our womb journeys are community interconnected. It's not just, to your point, like even before this call, when we're like thinking the men who are holding a protective sphere, it's just not only women, it's just not only females, it's just not only like, we're all so interconnected. Our healing is the healing of the community, and vice versa for every one of our siblings. And I want every one of our siblings to get to feel the way they want to feel in this lifetime, and to feel like the entire community is on their side. Like, I really dream that for us, and I know it's like so possible, and there's so much more listening that we'll get to do in this lifetime, and some of us, I think, are stewarding new forms of listening, which sounds so weird to say, but I think that there's more listening ahead, and I think we know that like all the stories will make sense. We can hold the past with so much kindness, and it will be very beautiful, and it is beautiful. That aside, when it fell into our sex life, it was like I was dysfunctional in my real life, but I had all this sexual energy, because sometimes that happens with trauma, like the sexual energy wants to heal, and it was so pressurized. He was so like, oh my God, I don't even know how to show up to this. And also because before that, my sexual invitation had a completely different tone, and all of a sudden the pacing was so sensuous, and I personally could feel the extent of, because it was such a boundary journey, an energetic boundary journey, and my energetic boundaries had been obliterated. So I had to rebuild. It felt like I had to rebuild everything around me. So it kind of really transformed my energetic practice, because it threw me into the imaginal, which I already had like poetic capacity, but then it was like, wow, I'm really going to have to work in the imaginal to do all of this repair work, relational repair work, violation repair work. And also it resurfaced the rape trauma that had somehow skipped under the radar. All the other things seemed way more important in my therapeutic history. And so when my partner was like, I don't think you've ever looked at this rape that happened to you. And I was doing the de-armoring. There are all these paths I went down to heal, and some I, had the ingenuity to do as we like, our intuition like returns, and we like, we are our own healers to a degree. And then the other ways that I was working with modalities and others. Yeah, it was so, I don't want to use the word intense. It's like, it's a lot for a partnership to hold. I was so grateful for his staying power. It was so confusing. I think he grew a lot. And also we're managing queerness, like the liberalness of that, and like how we all want to interface with, like, we're highly dimensional beings. It's so strange. We even try to use these cultural concepts to contain the magic of bodies. That aside, it was such a magnitude, and he showed up really, the way that the sword comes out when the womb is important is a really sharp knife. And I'm learning to wield it. And he definitely got cut because it's very difficult to figure out how to work with that righteous anger and the gorgeous chaos, the fluidity of existence, and the storm, the ways that we can talk about the gorgeousness of that wisdom. It's very unpopular still to recognize that womanhood isn't just soft. I love the softness of it. That has been healing, but the grounded knowing that we often think isn't beautiful. It's very strange. I think beauty is way vaster than we understand it to be. Anyway, it can be very scary a lot for the male population. And he had staying power and kind of rose to the occasion for that emotional refinement to actually partner someone who had gone through that trauma, as well as to partner someone who is centering their womb and the womb wisdom, because it's surrendering to your womb is really depersonalizing. I find I was like, wow, I'm gonna have to really give up and I'm meeting myself also, but it feels really like, wow, this is bigger than me. I'm gonna have to give up some things on this journey because it's actually for my benefit that I walk this walk. And I'll know more about it later. And I'm working with all the archetypes and all this stuff. Anyway, but in the actual sex life, it's like all of this is connected, so it's very difficult to talk in a linear fashion. But so there's the knife element, the emotional growth that we are going through together. I'm meeting myself in this like intensity of communication. I've never communicated before with any of my partners with so much self-ownership. So I'm like making a few errors. It's pretty difficult to do at first, especially without role models. We haven't seen very many, we didn't get to see our elders. Or in my case, I think the women I saw growing up who were standing inside of that feminism had to do a lot of borrowing of the masculinity around them to be taken seriously. So then like the feminism, if you want to call it that I was inhabiting had way more priestesshood to it, had way more galactic mysticism to it, has more mythology, has like the earth and moss. It's like of the water. It's like, it's my body is the environment. I'm merged and I'm also singular. It's having like, it's so perceptually wondrous and dynamic. And it's tricky when you're learning it by yourself in a pandemic. And like I had some resources that I was looking to, and we're trying to learn about polarity, divine union. I feel like a lot of the spiritual community was troubleshooting like what is divine union actually. And I found that really, I think both of us were pretty unimpressed, but also grateful to be learning about that. And exploring kink and BDSM and all these things while my body simultaneously, now that I have this discernment, I'm seeing through so much bullshit and not seeing a lot of ways to actually talk to it. And I'm fatigued and I'm tired, but he actually believes me. And to like sit next to someone who believes me and is like actually, and so like our journey is very tumultuous. We're holding a lot of complexity. It's been very difficult and isolating, but like the beauty of such a, sometimes we call it cosmic companionship, is that we've partnered believing each other. And I had a therapist at the time who's a sensitivity expert and who was equipping me to not think of myself in a pathological way, to like use my language to understand how to move through the world, not to belittle myself. So I was in this like wild adventure of learning how to do partnership, how to self-pleasure, how to believe me. I was on such a can I believe me journey that needed to happen no matter what. And to be partnered by someone who was interested in believing me while also deconditioning. That's a lot of shit hitting the fan, many late night stuff. I think someone from the outside, I think once like, it's easy to call it toxic when you're like working with that much stuff, and then like, is it loyalty or is this toxic? We were working and purging we were decoding so much stuff and really just sitting and trying to see it. We're like, what is it? What is this? How do we do this? Like just, it was gross. It was gross and wondrous and playful. It's like we were married for many lifetimes, even though we like, we're not married, but like, it's like we've had so much intimacy with the mysticism of living in human bodies and holding all of that pain, holding intergenerational pain, So I think it threw us into the partnership that we actually have, which is transforming so much intergenerational pain and the creativity of what is healer, what is artist. It's like we're the same. Why talk about it? You know, it's like it is just this existence thing. So we've been like partnered very deeply in that way. And in the sex life, we, you know, got to a place with my own journey with the rape and the violation where we've had seasons where we didn't have sex for like 3 years. We're not really even sexually active right now. Like it's very affectionate and tender. And part of that celibacy journey for me has been such an incredible refinement of listening. You know, there's still more healing for me to do. I think there's always more listening. There are more layers. And to even heal so far as like, oh my God, what's the next phase like? What's the next moment calling me forward? Will I have the bravery for the next part of the journey? You know, I have some friends, it's like, I couldn't live without sex. I remember feeling like I couldn't live without sex. And then to like walk so far as like, oh, I'm learning how to create without sex magic. Like learning to resource and connect and have faith and trust in ways that are, I never thought I could even handle this. And now I'm like, wow, I like don't need to have sex. Like the way that I'm relating to my sexuality, to my sensuality, I feel like almost sensuality is more liberating for me. It's like to have like to be in the sensual intelligence of life is like, oh my God. And then like the eros rises from there, the love and all of this. It's been a wild ride. My younger self I think is a little bit in awe, like because it was so unfathomable at the time, like having this much appreciation for my body, safety with myself, being able to touch myself and imagine with myself, to go to the psychological spaces I've been, to sit with the imaginal lover and redesign being loved before I even let someone else touch me, to reaffirm what I always knew in contact improv, which I know you know this, which is that touch happens before you start touching. I think really beautiful dancers can feel the room. We can exude so much presence that like we change the temperature of the room. So like to connect to that sense of performance art and interconnectedness and treat those boundaries that are beyond the body as legitimate, not optional, not for player performance, but as like my energetic boundaries are so fucking real. And you know, it's down to places where maybe we're not having sex, but like he'll come up and he'll just like touch my aura, kiss my aura. Like I can't do touch. I know. And like, you know, there might not be physical touch, but what's really true for my really unmasked vessel is I can feel you in the room and you raise your hand. Like I'm having an entire sensory experience. It's the air around me is so real. And so I feel like without the way the story has gone is that it's re-illuminated, you know, these like childlike aspects of sensitivity and things that we downplay for whatever reason. So to then end up like, wow, it's only so imaginary. And so I can feel it. I can feel just the hand, you know, right there. And so for me, even though I'm not maybe having a sexual experience that's climactic, like a younger self, a very young performance art version of me, I'm really grateful for the kind of sex she had. I'm not going to belittle my journey as a sexual being, but to end up in a place where I am now, where there's not, of course, like courage, I think is like mandatory for existing, but where I am as a sensual and sexual being has so much more length. I trust my pacing so much more. It's okay to not have something and manage disappointment. It's okay that romance and energetic exchange and all the ways that we could talk about being with another person, that the intimacy of it is ambiance. The intimacy of it is like the present, just like being so much more. I feel like I was always on a journey, even in art, of high resolution, presence, subtlety. And so for that to become like, oh, this is just how it is now in my little part of the world. like so high resolution subtlety that yes, sacred sex is beautiful and important, my relationship with me and eventually more partnered experiences, but it's almost just like so much less important than how I sit inside of myself now. And I couldn't sit inside of myself the way I can sit inside of myself now. And so it's beautiful that even though I love those things, they're so life-giving. There's so many beautiful wisdom teachers around sacred sexuality and all the ways that we can play with one another and like wisdom around how those things can, lead to some of the things that you were talking about, that people can come and find you and have a beautiful herbal and otherwise relationship to their sovereignty as someone who has a, conduit to bringing life forward. It's it then gets to be something that we really can choose. It's not this like peril, because before it felt very weighted having a womb, like my womb being important, all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, like not like I was falling under the lies of being in my 30s per se, and that being like, oh my God, like your childbearing years, etc. But it for a while felt really nerve-wracking, like the timing of it, the finances of it, the medicalness of it. And my medical journey still has more details. But like as you go, as I've gone with my womb, I'm now in a place, because the whole journey really is a relationship with time. We can call it boundaries, respect, but we can also call it time. And to be working with time where like, oh my God, I don't have to be culturally frazzled again, like hustled again into the timing around being a mom, being a mother, that like, because I was feeling that pressure, and it was really hard for a while to feel like so belittled by like the lack of preparation, or feeling like, oh, there's so much traumas in my body. Because before the IUD thing, I had already been preparing in case, I didn't know if that was something I wanted, but I wanted to prepare the waters of my being. And I wanted my womb also to be separate from my female lineage. I remember the first time my womb felt like mine. And it's beautiful, obviously, to be in a lineage, but it's actually very important for your body to belong to you and to have boundaries with your ancestors and with your lineage. And, that journey of like purifying, and also like your waters being a place you would want someone to live. Yeah, I think some of us, especially on the spiritual journey, we can get very nervous about like, oh my God, the waters, there's too much trauma in me for a child to be here, and feeling really nervous that I'm too damaged, or too much has happened to me, or I don't have energy anymore to clear and continue to clear, and like I'm a vessel that holds all this pain and grief. Like how could I ever be someone that like I would want to have a child inside me at all, regardless of the other complexities. So there's so many complexities as to whether to birth or not to birth, and miscarriage, and all these stories. And it's another story. Yeah, it's like it's easy to feel frazzled. But I think, and what I see in your embodiment also, is that when the womb is important, the womb isn't frazzled. The womb is like sitting here. It's like stunning, gorgeous. I remember the first time that I was like, my cervix is soft and gorgeous. Like to believe, like to have an internal relationship with yourself where the first time I understood that my cervix was beautiful, it was kind of like just not even a big deal. It's just like before I could hardly like touch my breasts, I could like all this stuff, the self-touch journey, and then it's like my cervix is stunning. My cervix is changing. I'm cyclical, like re-owning fluidity. And then to do that in partnership takes a deconditioning, I think, for a lot of us. Takes emotional resiliency, because we have to evolve as to how we listen and respect one another, especially when there's so much pain, that it's very easy to take structural, mass, cultural, intergenerational trauma and throw it at one person. And it's like, you actually are too small of a person to hold this. So we have to hold this in a way where I'm not projecting the enormity of my entire everything I can feel, which is bigger than my body, and shoving at you. But how can I respect you when I show up angry? And I think we are still learning that. I'm still learning like how my emotions can have different waveforms than they've had in the past. I'm not going to downplay with the big waveforms, but I talked a lot, but you're gorgeous.
Yeah, there's a few things I want to touch on to what you just spoke to, all of which was really beautiful. And I feel there's many parts that so many women are going to be able to connect to. The first thing is the centering of the womb in your life is not like a cute, fun process, and it really does require that warrior feminine to come through, the warrioress, the huntress, the protectress, that is just like, no fucking way are you going to mess with this sacred vessel. When I say that my womb is the center of my life, I really mean that and I embody that in that, like, especially around my bleed, my boundaries are unfuckwithable. And I learned that when I was living in the jungle, because in the jungle, within the tradition of the Kofan people, your bleed time is a full ceremony that is just as valuable as an ayahuasca ceremony. In their cosmology, menstrual blood and birth blood, the blood that comes from a woman's body, is more spiritually powerful than the energy of Yahe, the energy of ayahuasca. And so I learned living in the jungle for a full year and a half that, like, there is a level of protection around my bleed that no one gets to fuck with. And I was really deep in that process while living in the jungle. And it was reflected back to me by the community in that when I was bleeding, no one disturbed me. Men, women, children, every single one of them was like, oh, you're bleeding, rest. We'll see you in a couple days. Enjoy your time. And that was it. People cooked for me, people took care of me. If I needed things, people brought stuff from, the store, whatever. Like, I was so cared for. And then coming back to the United States very unexpectedly last November, and essentially having my bleed so disrespected by so many people, and really having to fight like tooth and nail against even like my own family members of like, no, I'm not fucking doing shit for you while I'm on the first 3 days of my period. That makes you uncomfortable. You don't agree with it. You don't understand it. You don't like it. I do not give a fuck. And I do not have to explain it to you. And there was a lot of rage that came through. So much rage and like blood rage, right? Like the rage that you get on the first 3 days of your bleed, where you're like, I'll rip your head off if you fuck with me. I had to move through a lot of that. I've softened around it now where the people in my life just get it because I've been so fierce about it. But I take off work the first 3 days of my bleed. I don't give a fuck. You need me to come in and cover? Nope, I will not be there. And I'm firm about it. And what I would say about that is I know how to track my cycle. I know when my bleed is coming. I know how to plan ahead. I, generally speaking, don't have issues because I center my whole life around what my womb needs. I know all the phases of my period. I know all the phases of my entire menstrual cycle. And so I just live in accordance to that. And when things are out of alignment, no part of me at this point feels like guilty about saying no. That's been a long process and a long process of learning how to translate the womb wisdom and the data and information that I'm receiving and to just speak it without trying to convince someone, without trying to educate someone, without trying to get someone to even see my perspective, to just be like, this is my truth, this is how I'm living, that's my boundary, and that's it. And so yeah, the womb centering is it is a alchemization, and for not just the men, but the people in your life who can like sit with the intensity of it, kudos to them. And then you will also start to see that people will drop off because they can't be in reverence for the womb. And a lot of that comes up around sexuality, what you were speaking to of like sex hustle culture, the way that I engaged with sex before and the way in which I shifted into sexuality later in my life when I was doing so much womb work. And also just the sacredness of celibacy. I am in a beautiful, very intentional celibacy period right now while I'm in this very sacred time of single womanhood after the end of my last partnership. And whenever my next partnership comes, who knows? But really honoring what you were speaking to of like the energetic sensitivity and the erotic aliveness that we can tap into at all times that does not have to be expressed through, penis in vagina sex. Like it really is. I loved what you were saying about like the aura kissing and just like the erotic nature of life in general and how that can move through. And I feel like women who have gone through a lot of sexual abuse and sexual violence, rape in whatever capacity, there can be this trauma response to just like have a lot of sex because you want to prove that you're not broken. You want to prove you're not damaged. You want to prove that you're still able to be this like mystical sex goddess. That was a big phase that I was in for a long time. And where I'm at now in this intentional celibacy journey, I've never felt so safe in my sexuality. I've never felt so safe in my body. I've never felt so alive in my erotic energy. And I'm not even partnered and I'm not even having like a big self pleasure practice these days. I mean, pleasure in terms of I just feel good in my body. I'm dancing around. I do a lot of body work. I'm eating well. Like I'm resting, like a lot of vaginal steaming. Like I feel so good. And because of that, I know that whenever I do come into partnership where sex is then reintroduced, whoa, what's going to happen? Who knows? Who cares? Like, it's actually not the point. The point is really like being like, what is my womb saying are like the relational conditions that are required in order to enter into this portal of quantum life calling, life in every capacity, life in the life of a child, life in the birth of a bloodline, but life in terms of what is being created and what kind of man is allowed to be in that space. Boy, you better believe that the standards are high, sky high, and all of that comes from that celibacy journey. And whether that's occurring when you're single, whether that's occurring within the context of a partnership, like the clearing of the field, the reorientation is so sacred. And the last thing I'll speak to, which I know has been a big experience for me, and I'm sure a lot of women can relate, which is the fear of carrying life when you yourself have been through so much sexual violation. I had a full week, I remember when I was living in the jungle, where I couldn't get out of bed because I was like, how could I ever, ever, ever carry life in this part of my body that has known so much abuse? How could I ever trust that I could create something pure, something clean, something innocent, something so sacred when like so much has been taken from me? And it was truly a week where I could not get out of bed, just crying, 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 crying. And that's a big block that a lot of women feel around motherhood. That's huge. And I have women in my life who have experienced rape and then who have gone into a motherhood journey, and it's been profoundly redemptive for them to know that like no one can take our purity, our innocence. No one can take our birthright to create sacred life and to birth it into the world, to nurture the next generation. Like, it doesn't matter what has happened to my body, what other people have done to it, what I've done to my own self through processes of re-victimization, trying to heal in very warped ways. I really am at a point now where I'm like, this is mine. This is mine. It belongs to no one else. And for a short period of time, it will belong to my future children. And God has cleared the way for that. Like, I trust that fully. So, just holding you in that and holding any women who walk with that fear, and just knowing that, like, that is also an incredible portal when life comes forth for women is there's a lot of clearing that these children bring as well. They bring their own soul imprints, they bring their own medicine, they bring all of their own gifts and blessings to the bloodline. And to know that you can alchemize a body that has gone through such horrendous violence into one that is capable of literally birthing the next generation into the future, that's the definition of magic. You know, that is the definition of like this psychedelic womb portal that we walk with. Oh my goodness, okay. We could go on and on and on. I think it's good to wrap up. I would love to give you an opportunity to share how people can connect with you, potentially work with you, anything that you're sharing in the world. Yeah, all that good stuff.
Ah, I'm so grateful, and it's so good to cry with you. There's so much crying we have to do together. If people want to play with me, I think a great way is to go to one of my websites, Mystic Dare. This is something that kind of got made after all of this embodiment intel kind of came forward and standing on long history. So mysticdare.com is a place that people can connect with my consciousness and court the idea of doing one-on-one work. And there is group work coming up. I've been preparing in strange ways for years for something called Grief Party. I am one of those people that knows how to bring unloved emotions and aspects of ourselves into communal spaces, and how to hold that, how to be held. So that's something that's in the near future. I love doing reclamational photography and pregnancy photography. These are some of the main things I'm thinking about right now. But just come and find me. I think mysticdare.com is a great place to start. And I am findable. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, as someone who was on the receiving end of your photography skills as well, I love, love, love the way that you capture magic behind the camera.
Mhm.
So, highly recommend. Well, wow. Natalie, this has been such a beautiful conversation. Really just offering the deepest gratitude, reverence, care, respect, love for the whole journey that you've walked, that you continue to walk, the
Mm.
ability to co-weave together. Thank you. This has been a really, really big gift. Thank you.